Video today on secondary dominant chords, or otherwise known as passing dominant chords. So we're just going to sort of jump straight in. A secondary dominant or a passing dominant chord are chords which resolve onto other degrees of the scale other than the tonic. And they're really just a way of like spicing up a chord progression. They often act as passing chords between two stable chords, and they sort of build some tension into what otherwise might be a relatively bland chord progression. So let's have a look at the example at the bottom of that slide. We're in C major, and we're just going from chord 1 to chord 6. And so in order to spice that up using a secondary dominant or a passing dominant chord, we would find the dominant of chord 6. So chord 6 is A minor, and the dominant of A minor is E major. So we'd use E dominant 7th to lead us to that A minor chord and add some tension into this chord progression. So here it is without the secondary dominant. And here it is with the secondary dominant. So there's 5/7 of A minor. So you can kind of hear, that brings in some tension. Now, the way I have written those out there does make the chords really, really very clear. You can see that all the triads and the sevenths are in sort of a close position, but the voice leading in that example is terrible. Really bad voice leading. So we're going to have a look at some examples with some better voice leading. Here's the same progression. So here we've got C major to A minor. And here we have the same progression, but with the passing dominant in a kind of inversion. So we've got C major, 5/7 C of A minor, so E dominant 7th in second inversion, which resolves to A minor. So I'll just play those two again. Here's C major to A minor, and here it is with the secondary dominant. Okay, so as with all dominant 7th chords, they must resolve in a particular way. The leading note in a dominant 7th chord must resolve upwards to the tonic, and the 7th in a dominant 7th chord must fall to the 3rd. So that's the thing that really makes those dominant 7th chords resolve smoothly onto A minor, in this case, onto the target chord. I'll just play that again, this time with the secondary dominant in a different inversion. So here we have the same C major to A minor. And here it is, except this time with 5/7 B. Okay, so there we have it. That's broadly speaking what a secondary dominant, aka a passing dominant, does. The best way to practice this is to just get used to writing them. So I've got a brief exercise here with some sort of gap fills to do. So we've got 1, 5/7 of 6, going to 6, and then I've said 5/7 C of 4, going to chord 4, 1B, 5/7 C of 1, and then 1. If you'd like, you could pause the video here and have a go at filling in those two missing chords. Okay, so here are the answers. If I just play that through, so we get a sense of the sound of it, we've got... Okay, so we can hear that that's a really quite smooth chord progression, and those dominant 7th chords really build in some tension to what might otherwise be a relatively bland progression. Notice also that again in each of those dominant seventh chords, the leading note rises and the seventh falls. Particularly in the ones that you've done yourself, you need to make sure that that's what happens. That's a way of ensuring that the tension resolves smoothly out of that dominant seventh. Notice also that there's quite a lot of use of common tones between the chords, so there's not a lot of movement really from one chord to another. That E on the top stays pretty much still. You go from C, up a step, down a step, staying on C, and that helps keep the chord progression really smooth. Right, so there's the first exercise. I've also got a second exercise here. This time I've popped in some bass notes for the first ones. So we've got 1, 5, 7, B of A minor going to an A minor chord. 1, 5, 7, B of 5. So here you'll need to work out what chord 5 is going to be in G major. 1, 5, 7, B of 3. So similarly, you'll need to work out what chord 3 is in D minor. And then here, 1, 5, 7, B of 6 and 6. I've not put in any bass notes here, so you'll need to work those out. So pause the video here and see if you can work out what those chord progressions are going to look like. Okay, so this is, I should say, these are sort of possible answers. They don't have to look exactly like this. I'll just play them through so that you've got an idea of what they're going to sound like. That was the example in C major. Here's the example in G major. Here's the example in D minor. And here's the example in D major. Okay, so those are the answers for exercise 2. Or those, I should say, are sort of there's a possible answer. As long as you have got the right chords, as in you've got the right notes and the right chords, and you've made sure that the leading note resolves up to the tonic and the seventh and the dominant seventh chord resolves down in each case, then you have a viable set of answers. It would also be helpful if the voice leading between the chords was really smooth. So each note in the chord moved between chords via the smallest possible step to make sure that it's really very smooth indeed. Right, I hope that's helpful. I hope that's something that you can sort of refer to in your own composition work. And again, as I say, this is really a way that you might spice up a chord progression. You might also use it as a way of forcing, or maybe like visiting another key area. So you might make use of that secondary dominant here to have a phrase in the relative minor, or you might, in this case, have a secondary dominant here to have a phrase in the relative major, or even in the dominant. It's that's a sort of another usage for these secondary dominant, aka passing dominant chords. But hopefully this video is useful and you can keep referring to it. Thank you very much.